Have you ever felt a connection with an animal so deep it defied all logic? Have you ever witnessed loyalty so fierce it could expose a hidden danger? This is the story of Jack, my German shepherd, and the day he saved us all, even when the world was determined to tear us apart. The courtroom air was thick, heavy, with a silence that pressed down on me, stealing my breath. Every eye in the place was trained on me, Jonathan, a sergeant confined to a wheelchair, a collection of medals gleaming against the stark backdrop of my military uniform. My hand, trembling slightly, gripped the worn leather leash of the magnificent German shepherd at my side, Jack. He stood in perfect composure, a testament to years of rigorous training, but to me, he was so much more than a military working dog. He was family. The judge's voice, amplified by the courtroom's acoustics, cut through the silence, each word a painful reminder of the battle I was facing. The Army had decided Jack was to be reassigned, deemed a valuable asset needed for another mission. The words felt like a betrayal, a cruel twist of fate after all we had been through together. My knuckles whitened as I tightened my grip on Jack's leash. "Your Honor," I began, my voice raw with emotion, "Jack is more than just an asset. He saved my life in ways no one here can possibly understand." I paused, struggling to maintain my composure as memories flooded my mind. On the battlefield, he pulled me from danger, shielded me from gunfire, even warned me of traps before I could see them. My voice cracked. And when I came home, broken and lost, unable to face myself, Jack was there. He gave me a reason to keep going. I looked at the judge, pleading with my eyes. "Please," I begged, "don't take him away from me." The courtroom remained hushed, the silence punctuated only by the occasional stifled sob. Some wiped away tears, while others exchanged glances of pity and indignation. The judge, however, remained impassive, his gaze fixed on me. He leaned forward, ready to deliver his verdict, the words poised on his lips. But then something extraordinary happened. Jack, who had been standing calmly by my side, suddenly surged forward, the leash ripping from my grasp. He advanced toward the judge's bench, his bark echoing through the courtroom like a thunderclap. A collective gasp swept through the room. "Jack!" I cried out, my voice laced with panic, but deep down, a flicker of recognition sparked within me. I'd seen this behavior before, countless times on the battlefield. This wasn't mere disobedience, this was a warning. "What's wrong with the dog?" someone whispered from the back of the room. My chest tightened as I wheeled myself forward. "He never just barks," I explained, my voice trembling. "He only does that when there's danger. He's trying to warn us about something." The judge froze, his gavel suspended in midair, his eyes fixed on Jack. The room fell silent once more, save for Jack's persistent barking. It was as if he was trying to convey something urgent, something vital. Whatever Jack was sensing, it wasn't just about me. He knew something, something that no one else in the room did, and for the first time that day, a glimmer of hope ignited within me. This wasn't just a final goodbye. Something bigger was at play, and Jack was determined to expose it. Jack lowered his posture, his ears pinned back, his eyes locked onto the judge's bench. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair, my heart pounding in my chest. This was no random outburst. Jack's body language was unmistakable. He had detected something. "Jack," I called out, my voice firm but shaky. He glanced back at me, his eyes sharp and reassuring. Without hesitation, he turned back to the judge's bench, taking cautious steps forward. His barking morphed into a deep, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. The audience grew increasingly nervous, the sympathy they had previously shown me replaced by unease. "Mr. Jonathan," the judge said, his tone laced with annoyance, "control your dog or I will be forced to—" "He's not misbehaving," I interrupted, my voice rising in defiance, even as fear gnawed at my insides. "He's trained to detect threats, bombs, explosives, danger. He wouldn't act like this unless he sensed something was wrong." Silence descended upon the courtroom once more, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Disbelief slowly gave way to dread, spreading through the crowd like a disease. Before anyone could react, Jack abruptly stopped barking. The silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic beating of my heart. Jack's body went rigid, his head snapping towards the tall, heavy wooden doors leading into the courtroom. A low, menacing growl rumbled in his chest. The change was so sudden, so violent, that even the judge froze. All eyes turned to the doors. A collective unease filled the room, whispers turning into panicked murmurs. My breathing became rapid as I followed Jack's line of sight, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had seen this exact behavior on the battlefield moments before Jack had uncovered a bared explosive or signaled an imminent ambush. Whatever he sensed now, it wasn't good. "Jack," I whispered, my voice cracking with tension. "What is it?" Jack didn't move. His entire body remained rigid, his growl growing deeper and deeper, vibrating through the air like a warning siren. Whatever he had discovered was no longer just a threat to me, but potentially to everyone in the room. The judge, who had been about to reprimand me moments ago, now looked flustered, exchanging anxious glances with the officers. His gavel remained clutched in his trembling hand. The air felt charged with an electricity no one could explain. My breathing quickened, my hands gripping the arms of my wheelchair, bracing myself as if for an explosion. I had seen this too many times on the battlefield. Jack's instincts were the difference between life and death, and his warnings always meant something dangerous was close. "Keep calm," I muttered to myself, but the words rang hollow. Even I, Jack's closest companion, was unsure how to proceed. One of the officers, a large man with a wary expression, finally stepped forward, his hand resting on the weapon at his hip. "It's just a dog, right?" he muttered, though his voice betrayed his nervousness. "Probably just a reaction to the noise or the crowd." Yet as he spoke, he moved cautiously, every step measured. I shook my head, my voice pitched just high enough to be heard over the growing whispers. "Jack doesn't react to noise or people like this. He's trained to sense things we can't see. Trust me, if he's growling like that, there's a reason." My words hung in the air for a moment. No one moved. Finally, the judge, looking clearly puzzled, nodded to the officers, signaling them to check the door. Jack's growls intensified as the officers approached the door, the larger man reaching out hesitantly to grip the metal handle. For a moment, the entire room held its breath. My heart pounded as I watched every muscle in Jack's body coil with anticipation. He remained rigid, his growls turning into a series of sharp barks as the doorknob began to turn and the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. At first, the space appeared empty, yet Jack's barking only intensified, his focus locked on something invisible. The larger officer stepped into the hallway, still holding his weapon. He glanced back at the courtroom, his face pale, and then turned forward again. A second later, his voice broke the silence. "There's something here." My heart rate spiked as I leaned forward, my chest tightening with fear. Whatever the officer saw had ignited Jack's instincts, and I knew better than anyone that Jack was never wrong. The air in the courtroom felt heavier, as if the tension itself was devouring all the oxygen. Jack's barking rang out sharply, echoing off the wooden walls, his body locked in a stance of complete alert. Muscles tense, head lowered, eyes laser-focused on the dark hallway behind the door. The officer who had stepped out was visibly uncomfortable. He took another hesitant step, his boots clicking on the tiled floor, his hand hovering near his weapon. It was as if he expected something to rush out of the shadows at any second. "What's going on out there?" the judge demanded, his voice betraying his own fear despite his effort to stay in control. His grip on the gavel tightened, knuckles white, eyes darting anxiously between the doorway and Jack. A menacing rumble shook the courtroom, sending shivers down everyone's spine. The larger officer glanced back at the room, his face ashen with uncertainty. "I see nothing," he said hesitantly, measuring his words. "But it's quiet. Too quiet." His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the silent room like a gunshot. I leaned forward in my wheelchair, my stomach twisting into knots. I had heard those words too many times on the battlefield, and they always heralded disaster. My voice cut through the anxious hum of the crowd. "Jack doesn't react to nothing. If he's acting like this, there's a reason. We need to evacuate now." My command rang out urgently, but the audience was frozen, paralyzed by fear and confusion. Another officer, smaller in build, stepped forward, pulling a flashlight from his belt and shining its beam into the hallway. The bright light cut through the darkness, revealing a polished floor and little else. "There's nothing," he muttered in a shaky tone, "just an empty hallway." But as he spoke, his hand trembled, betraying his calm front. Jack, however, was anything but calm. His growls continued to grow louder, his barks more frenzied. He strained forward on the leash, almost snapping it from my grasp. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic clang echoed down the hallway, a sound unmistakably loud in the suffocating stillness. The smaller cop jerked his flashlight in the direction of the noise, stepping back instinctively. Jack lunged toward the sound, barking so fiercely that his claws scraped the floor. Gasps echoed around the courtroom, and panic began to spread through the crowd. The larger officer drew his weapon, his voice strained with worry. What the hell? My heart pounded. I raised my voice above the chaos. Bring Jack back, I shouted, my words trembling with fear. Whatever was happening was coming closer. Another clang rang out, louder this time, and the air crackled with an unspoken sense of dread. Jack barked more desperately, as if his sheer will could propel him through the threshold and confront whatever was lurking in that hallway. I clung to his leash, my pulse roaring in my ears. I could feel it, too. Something was about to happen. The officers in the hallway cautiously pressed forward, guns drawn, eyes scanning the dim corridor. The smaller officer's flashlight quivered in his hand, the beam slicing through shadows that revealed nothing. Jack's barking continued, his growls turning guttural. My instinct screamed at me to call for an evacuation, but I saw the fear paralyzing everyone. No one moved. Do you see anything? The judge called out, voice cracking. He leaned forward in his chair, the gavel shaking in his trembling hand. The larger officer glanced over his shoulder, face pale and shining with sweat. Still nothing, he replied, voice low and strained, as though he was afraid speaking too loudly might provoke whatever lay ahead. He took another step, his boots echoing ominously. The spectators in the courtroom murmured anxiously, some clutched their belongings, others edging closer to the exit, the uneasy energy spreading like a contagion. I rolled forward slightly, my gaze locked on Jack, who had gone silent again. His ears were stiff, body still, eyes fixated on the open doorway. He sees something, I said shakily. I don't know what it is, but it's there. Just then, as the officer reached the halfway point of the hallway, a shadow moved, so fleeting it was almost imperceptible, yet enough to make the smaller cop stumble back and gasp. His flashlight jerked toward the movement as he yelled in panic. The larger cop froze, gun aimed into the darkness. Jack barked again, nearly snapping the leash from my grip. Get out of there, I yelled, my voice echoing through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel, desperate to restore order, but the sound was drowned out by the growing din of chaos. People in the gallery stood, their anxious whispers turning into frightened shouts. Then, from somewhere in the hallway, we heard a single heavy footstep, slow, cautious, almost deliberate. Jack's bark turned into a low growl, his bare teeth flashing as he braced himself. Fear rattled through me. Whatever was out there was neither rushing nor hiding. It was moving toward the officers, wanting to be seen. Each footstep slammed into my consciousness, reminding me of an invisible countdown to disaster. Jack's growl intensified, and he pulled so hard on his leash that my wheelchair rolled forward an inch. Everyone calm down, the judge shouted, slamming his gavel once more, but panic had already overtaken the gallery. People bolted from their seats, grabbing their belongings. The larger cop remained frozen in the hallway, his gun raised, while his partner hovered nearby, their flashlight beams darting madly across the walls. Still, they found nothing but shifting shadows. Get out of there, I shouted sharply again. This time my words were razor-edged with urgency, yet the larger cop kept peering into the gloom, jaw set. Then the shadow moved again, this time unmistakable, slow and deliberate. The smaller cop gasped, his flashlight flickering. There's someone there, he stammered, the voice barely audible. The beam of light caught something, a tall figure, that vanished into the darkness almost as soon as it appeared. The larger cop steadied his weapon. Who's there? He demanded in a commanding tone. Step out where I can see you. Silence was the only answer, thick and oppressive. Jack's bark rose to a peak, his teeth bared, body coiled. Suddenly, a figure stepped into the light, slowly, almost casually. A man emerged from the hallway, his face obscured by a hood, hands in the pockets of a thick coat. Each step was deliberate, and despite the chaos, he moved calmly, as if savoring the moment. Jack's growl turned feral. His claws scratched the floor as I fought to hold him back. Who are you? The larger cop demanded, gun locked on the figure. The man did not respond. He merely stepped forward, allowing a crooked smile to appear beneath his hood. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a surge of overwhelming fear. Something about this man felt not just threatening, but deeply wrong. He raised his hand slowly, making the officer tense, and raised their weapons higher. Relax, the man said quietly, his voice cold and calm. I'm not here to harm anyone. But the way he said it, how the words hovered in the air, only made the room feel even colder. I knew instantly he was lying, and Jack knew it too. Silence fell as the man stood at the edge of the hallway, partially lit by the flickering flashlight. Jack's growl rumbled like a rolling storm. The officers shifted, fingers tightening on their triggers, hands slick with sweat despite their training. My heart hammered in my chest. The man's posture was far too poised for someone facing down armed officers and a highly trained dog. He tilted his head slightly, then took another slow step. All attention zeroed in on him. Jack barked fiercely, nearly yanking me forward with the leash. I struggled, palms sweaty against the handle, whispering, "No, Jack, no!" My voice didn't carry over the crowd, but the judge caught my eye, confusion etched on his face. The smaller officer stepped closer, flashlight in one hand, the other hovering near his holster. "Sir?" he began in an unsteady voice. "Identify yourself." At last, the man raised his head, revealing a small part of his face. His eyes were cold and piercing, sending a chill through me. "I said, I'm not here to hurt anyone," he repeated calmly, yet then his hand slipped into his pocket, prompting both officers to shout at him to stop and drop whatever he was holding. The man paused, his smile widening. "Just a little something to make things more interesting," he said, his voice dripping with malice. He withdrew his hand, revealing a small metallic object, a detonator. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. The officers lunged forward, but they were too late. The man pressed the button. The world exploded. Not literally, of course, but the chaos that erupted was deafening. People screamed, chairs overturned, and the officers wrestled the man to the ground. But the damage was done. The detonator was a distraction, a way to create confusion, while something else was set in motion. Jack knew it. Even as the officer struggled with the man, Jack remained focused on the hallway. He barked frantically, pulling at his leash, trying to drag me forward. "What is it, boy?" I cried out, my heart pounding. "What do you see?" And then I saw it. A small, black object lying on the floor, partially hidden in the shadows. "A bomb!" "Bomb!" I screamed, my voice hoarse. "There's a bomb!" The officers froze, their eyes widening in horror. The man on the ground chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Too late," he hissed. "It's already set." Panic surged through me. We were trapped. There was no way to evacuate everyone in time. We were all going to die. But then Jack sprang into action. Ignoring the chaos around him, he lunged forward, dragging me and my wheelchair towards the bomb. "Jack, no," I cried out, but he wouldn't listen. He knew what he had to do. With incredible speed and precision, Jack began to work. He sniffed the device, his nose twitching, and then, using his teeth and paws, he started to dismantle it. I watched in disbelief as Jack, my loyal companion, my best friend, risked his life to save us all. He worked with a focus and determination that I had never seen before, his every move precise and deliberate. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Jack worked on the bomb. The tension in the room was palpable, the silence broken only by the sound of Jack's frantic movements and the occasional sob. Finally, after what seemed like an age, Jack stepped back from the device. He looked at me, his eyes shining with pride, and then he let out a soft bark. "He did it," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "He disarmed the bomb." A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. The officers who had been watching in stunned silence rushed forward to examine the device. They confirmed what we already knew. Jack had saved us. The man on the ground, his face contorted with rage, began to shout and curse, but no one paid him any attention. All eyes were on Jack, the hero of the hour. The judge, his face pale but relieved, banged his gavel. "Order!" he cried out. "Order in the court!" He then turned to me, his expression softening. "Mr. Jonathan," he said, "in light of recent events, the court has decided to reconsider its decision regarding Jack's reassignment." My heart leaped with joy. "You mean—" "I mean," the judge said, smiling, "that Jack will be staying with you. He has more than earned his place by your side." A cheer erupted from the gallery. People clapped, shouted, and cried, their emotions overflowing. I reached out and hugged Jack, burying my face in his fur. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for saving us all." Jack licked my face in response, his tail wagging furiously. He didn't need words. We understood each other perfectly. The man who had brought the bomb into the courtroom was taken away, his plans foiled, his evil intentions thwarted by the courage and loyalty of a dog. As for Jack and me, we left the courtroom together, our bond stronger than ever. We had faced death together, and we had emerged victorious. Jack wasn't just a dog, he was a hero. He was my hero, and he would always be by my side, my loyal companion, my best friend. The army decorated Jack for his bravery, but he didn't care about the medals. He only wanted to be with me, and I with him. In the end, Jack's unwavering loyalty and heroic actions not only saved our lives, but also solidified our bond, proving that the love between a man and his dog can overcome any obstacle, even the cold, unfeeling machinery of bureaucracy. Jack wasn't just my service dog, he was my family, my savior, and my hero.